The Iroko tree bleeds once a year, always on the same day. No one dares touch it, not since the night a girl was buried beneath its roots. Her name was Ijeoma, a slave girl silenced by power and shame. Every drop of blood from the tree is a story untold, a scream swallowed by earth. Children are told to stay away, but the tree still calls, softly like a lullaby. And when the wind blows just right, you can hear her voice in the leaves. "Remember me," it whispers, "so I can finally sleep." Hello, welcome back. As you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also share with your friends. Now back to the story. They say the tree weeps because she still can't speak. That was the first thing little Ibuka remembered his grandmother saying about the Iroko that stood behind their family's compound. Nobody went near it. The ground around the tree was always dry, but its bark was damp, dark red patches like dried palm oil. But they said it wasn't palm oil. Every year, on the 7th day after the New Yam festival, the tree bled. Old Mama Ijike, the village midwife, said she had seen the tree cry with her own eyes. "The blood doesn't drip fast," she once whispered, her milky eyes fixed on the horizon. "It comes out slowly like sorrow leaking from a wound." Ibuka didn't understand much, but he knew something wasn't right with that tree. Whenever he asked questions, adults would hush him. His father would grow stiff. His mother would grip his hand tighter. "Don't ask things that don't concern children," she'd say. But the mystery of the Iroko grew inside him like a seed. It started properly when Ibuka's uncle Ozoemena returned to the village from the big city. He was a tall man with tired eyes and skin too light for someone who had been gone just 10 years. People said he'd gone mad in the city, that the spirits had followed him. But the chief, Ibuka's grandfather, welcomed him back with kola nut and goat meat, like nothing was wrong. That night, after the fire had died and the drums were quiet, Ibuka couldn't sleep. His room was close to the backyard and the window faced the Iroko. The moon was full, bright enough to see everything. That's when he saw his uncle standing under the tree. At first he thought Ozoemena was urinating or praying, but then he saw him kneel. His head touched the ground. He pressed his palm against the bark and whispered something. And then, Ibuka would swear on the gods, he saw a thin line of red crawl down the trunk. What? Ibuka's breath caught in his throat. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He just watched as his uncle stared at the red liquid with wide eyes, then stood slowly and walked back inside the house like nothing had happened. The next morning no one mentioned it. Ibuka tried to bring it up during breakfast, but his mother threw him a sharp look. Ozoemena ate quietly, eyes sunken, hands trembling slightly. He didn't speak. But later that week he started digging. It wasn't much at first. A little scraping near the tree's roots late at night when he thought no one was watching. But Ibuka watched. Every night. And every night his uncle dug a little more. By the 4th night, he had a shallow pit the size of a grave. Ibuka couldn't take it anymore. He ran to his grandmother. Mama Adiku had seen nearly 80 harmattans. Her back was bent, and her hands were dark with old burns from cooking, but her mind was sharp. "Grandma," Ibuka whispered, "Uncle is digging beside the Iroko." She didn't flinch. She just looked at him long and deep. Then she sighed and said, "The tree remembers." "What does it remember?" Ibuka asked. She reached for her walking stick and rose slowly. Something that should have been forgotten. That night she told Ibuka the story. Long ago, before even Mama Adiku was born, during the dark days of the slave raids, their village had been targeted. Chiefs made secret deals. Some gave up strangers. Some gave up their own. Chief Uche, Ibuka's great-grandfather, was a powerful man, rich in yams and wives and cattle. But when the white men came, they wanted something else. They wanted his daughter. Adama was 16. Beautiful, sharp, proud. She had a fire in her eyes that couldn't be tamed. Chief Uche refused to give her up. Instead, he offered another girl, a slave girl named Ijeoma. No one knew where she came from. She had been captured from another village years before, barely 7 years old when she arrived. She was quiet, obedient, and never caused trouble. But one night, Chief Uche took her to the Iroko tree behind his compound and told her to wait there for the moon to rise. They said he covered her mouth so she wouldn't scream. They said he buried her alive. Mama Adiku's voice cracked as she spoke. And from that day the tree has bled. Every year. Same time. Same day. Ibuka's stomach turned. But why would Uncle dig it up now? She wiped her eyes. Because the blood is calling someone. Later that night Ibuka snuck out again. This time he didn't stay by the window. He crept quietly through the back door, across the hard ground, and hid behind a stack of old firewood near the tree. Ozoemena was already there. Sweat poured from his body. He dug like a man possessed. His hands were raw, blistered, shaking. "I hear her," he whispered. "She sings to me." He paused and looked up. "You're watching." Ibuka froze. His heart slammed against his chest. "Don't be afraid," his uncle said softly. "She only wants someone to remember her name." Then he struck the ground one last time, and the earth let out a wet sigh. A small white bone poked through the dirt. Ibuka screamed. And the Iroko wept. Ibuka's scream shook the compound. Lamps flickered on. Doors opened. Footsteps rushed through the compound like wind in dry leaves. But by the time they reached the tree, Ozoemena was gone. Only Ibuka remained, standing there, trembling, pointing to the small white bone sticking out of the ground. His mother reached him first. She grabbed him tight, held him close. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice sharp with fear. But Ibuka couldn't speak. His eyes remained fixed on the shallow hole near the base of the Iroko. Mama Adiku arrived, slower, leaning on her stick. Her eyes found the bone instantly. And something in her face changed, like she'd been waiting for this moment all her life. "She's awake," she said quietly. They filled the hole. Covered it quickly with sand and dead leaves. Nobody asked questions. Nobody said a word about what they saw. But the next morning everyone knew. Word spread fast in the village. The boy saw a bone under the Iroko. The mad one Ozoemena has been digging graves. The tree has started bleeding again. And then something strange happened. A dog went mad. A brown one that belonged to the village hunter. It ran straight into the Iroko tree in the middle of the night and bashed its head until it died. The next night, a newborn goat cried like a baby and dropped dead by morning. The night after, a woman miscarried while sitting under a tree near the shrine. Each time someone mentioned the Iroko. Some said it was a curse. Others said the ancestors were angry. But nobody dared say the girl's name. Not yet. Ozoemena didn't return for 2 days. When he finally did, he walked into the compound with his clothes torn, face scratched, and eyes wide like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. "She's angry," he muttered. "She wants her name back." Chief Obina, Ibuka's grandfather, called a family meeting. All the elders gathered in the obi, the large hut at the center of the compound. The air was thick with the smell of palm wine and worry. "This madness must stop," he said. "My own son, my grandson, all disturbed because of a tree? It's just a tree." But Ozoemena shook his head. "It's not just a tree. It's a mouth. A mouth filled with blood and silence. And it wants to speak." One of the uncles snorted. "Then let it talk. What do you want us to do?" "Ask it questions." Ozoemena stood. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "We dig. We dig and we bring her out." Gasps filled the air. Someone muttered a prayer. "Are you mad?" the chief barked. "You want to wake a spirit that has rested for generations?" "She never rested," Mama Adiku said, rising slowly. "She was buried in fear. Not peace." Ibuka had never seen the elders go so quiet. They argued about land. They shouted about goats. But this left them speechless. That night, no one slept. In the middle of the night, Ibuka heard chanting. He slipped out again, barefoot, careful not to wake anyone. This time the digging wasn't secret. A group of young men, some from the family, some from the village, were gathered around the Iroko. Ozoemena led them, his shirt tied around his waist, sweat soaking through his wrapper. They sang softly. Old words. Words Ibuka didn't understand. The ground was softer now. Almost like the earth wanted them to dig. Every strike of the shovel brought up more than just dirt. A bead. A shred of cloth. A rusted anklet. Then a finger bone. Someone dropped the shovel and ran. But the rest kept digging. Mama Adiku arrived at dawn. She stood by the tree, her head wrapped in white cloth, and poured libation from a small calabash. "Ijeoma," she said. The name sounded like a whisper carried by the wind. "Daughter of sorrow. We remember you." The sun rose, and they found the skull. Small. Cracked. Still bearing the faint marks of rope. A scream echoed through the trees, but it didn't come from the village. It came from the Iroko. From the tree itself. A high-pitched wail that stopped every bird mid-flight and sent children running into their mother's arms. For the first time in living memory, the tree bled in the morning. Thick red lines oozed from its bark, running like tears. They wrapped the bones in white cloth. Mama Adiku insisted she be buried properly. With chants. With songs. With the kind of goodbye a child deserves. The chief didn't attend. Later that evening, Ozoemena sat alone by the fire. His face was calm. Quiet. "She's not angry anymore," he said. Ibuka sat beside him. How do you know? Ozoemena smiled faintly. She told me. Ibuka didn't ask how. He didn't need to. Because that night, for the first time in over 50 years, the Iroko tree didn't bleed. The Iroko tree didn't bleed that night. Not the next morning. Not the next week. The red stain on its bark dried out slowly, like it had finally finished crying. For the first time in years, the compound felt normal again. But beneath the calm, something was shifting. Ozoemena stopped speaking to people. He no longer joined the others during evening meals or sat with the elders under the Udala tree. He spent his days walking in circles around the tree, whispering to himself. Once Ibuka heard him muttering, "She's quiet but not gone." At first the family thought it was grief or madness. Maybe the years in the city had broken something in him. But then strange things started to happen, things that couldn't be explained. It began with dreams. Ibuka was the first. He woke up sweating, heart pounding. In the dream, a young girl in tattered wrappers stood beside the Iroko tree, her arms folded, staring at him. Her lips didn't move, but he heard her voice clearly. He lied. The next day, his cousin Ifeananya confessed she had the same dream. Then another cousin. Then Mama Adiku. Always the same girl. Same message. He lied. The chief called for silence. No more talk of this spirit. We have done the burial. Let the dead rest. But the dreams kept coming. Then one afternoon, during a light rain, the tree bled again. Not a slow weep like before. This time it gushed. Thick red liquid poured from the trunk like fresh blood. It soaked the ground. It stained the roots. People ran to fetch elders. Drummers were sent to the shrine. A goat was slaughtered in panic. Still the bleeding didn't stop. Ozoemena stood in front of the tree, bare-chested, letting the blood soak into his skin. "She's angry again," he said. "Because we buried her body but not the truth." Ibuka listened closely. What truth? Ozoemena turned slowly. Chief Uche didn't sacrifice Ijeoma to save Adanma. That was never the reason. The adults around them murmured. No one dared speak. Ozoemena continued. He sacrificed her to cover up what he did. She was carrying his child. Gasps exploded like firecrackers. Mama Adiku collapsed on her stool. Chinik. Ozoemena's voice trembled. She tried to run. She threatened to tell. So he made a deal with the slave raiders. Gave them strangers. Lied to the village. And buried the girl before she could speak. Ibuka looked up at the tree. It pulsed. As if the blood inside it was alive. "We were never cursed," Ozoemena whispered. "We were guilty." The next morning, the villagers gathered for a meeting. Elders, women, children. Even the chief came, though his face was pale. He sat quietly under the palm fronds as Ozoemena stood before them. "This is not just family business anymore," he said. "The girl was one of us. She died here. Was buried here. Cried here. And now she's asking us, what will you do?" One of the hunters stood. "What can we do? She's dead. The chief who did it is dead. We already buried her properly." But Ozoemena shook his head. "Her name is not in our records. Her story was erased. Even her bones were almost forgotten. If we do not speak the truth, her spirit will never sleep." Mama Adiku raised her hand slowly. Her voice was thin but firm. "Then speak it. Carve her name into the Iroko. Let her remember. And let the children remember. So that no other girl is ever buried in silence again." They agreed. That evening Ozoemena took a carving knife. With trembling hands he scratched the name Ijeoma into the bark of the Iroko. Each letter deep. Each letter slow. And with every stroke the tree bled a little less. When he finished, the bleeding stopped completely. The next day the Iroko was dry. People still stayed away from it but no longer out of fear. It became a place of quiet. Of memory. Mothers took their daughters to sit under it, telling them the story of the girl who was wronged. Girls placed flowers at its base. Boys stood in silence, learning a kind of respect that no elder could teach them. Ibuka went there every morning. Just to sit. To think. One day as he sat beneath its shadow, a breeze passed through the leaves. And he heard it, not a voice, not words, but a feeling. Ozoemena left the village soon after. He didn't say goodbye. Just packed his things and walked down the dusty road at dawn. Before he left, he placed a small wooden carving at the base of the tree. It was the figure of a girl. Arms outstretched. Head lifted to the sky. No one touched it. Because everyone knew she was finally free. The Iroko tree was quiet now. It stood tall and dry, no more blood seeping from its bark, no more strange dreams. The name Ijeoma, carved into it had changed everything. Or so they thought. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Ibuka noticed it first. A shift in the air. The tree no longer bled, but it pulsed, its bark warm like skin. Some nights, he would sit beneath it and feel the ground throb gently as if something still moved below. At first he kept it to himself. He didn't want to stir fear again. Not after everyone had started to breathe easy. But one night as he sat under the tree with his cousin Ifyananya, she whispered, "You feel it too, don't you?" He nodded. "Like it's alive." "It is," she said, voice low. "But not in a good way." That same week, the goats started acting strange again. One refused to eat. Another kept staring toward the tree, ears twitching, until it suddenly dropped dead, foam spilling from its mouth. A chicken laid an egg filled with black liquid. Even the well water near the compound began to taste bitter. The villagers tried to ignore it. They said maybe the rainy season had brought something bad from the bush. Maybe the gods were testing their patience. But the old ones knew better. Mama Adiku called another family meeting. She was now too weak to walk without help, but her voice was clear. "We remembered her," she said. "But we forgot what was done to her." The family stared at her in silence. "Burial is not enough," she continued. "Telling the truth is not enough. We must undo what was done." Chief Obinna, still alive but frail, shifted in his seat. "You want to dig again?" "No," she said. "I want to cleanse the land. Clean it with truth, not just words. The Iroko still holds her pain. We must take it away." "How?" someone asked, and that's when she revealed something no one expected. There was another grave. The compound went still. "Another?" Ibuka asked. Mama Adiku nodded. "Beside Igioma's. But deeper. After he buried her, Chief Uche buried the child." Gasps echoed across the room. "She was pregnant?" someone asked. "Barely. But far enough." The midwife knew. Uche ordered her to remove the child, bury it beneath a separate tree not far from the Iroko, and keep quiet. "Who was the midwife?" another person asked. Mama Adiku raised her eyes. "Me." No one moved. "I was 17. It was my first real test. He told me if I ever spoke of it, I'd end up beneath the same tree. I kept quiet for 63 years. Her hands shook as she reached for a calabash filled with ash and palm oil. "This land is sick," she said, "because of the silence we planted in it. If the child still lies there, we must bring it out. Give it a name. Lay it beside its mother." The elders murmured. Some nodded. Some looked afraid. But by the next morning, the digging began again. They chose the spot Mama Adiku pointed to, a smaller tree near the compound's edge. It was bent slightly, bark pale, always dry even when it rained. The digging was slow, careful, as if the ground itself didn't want to be disturbed. Hours passed. Then a sound, a hollow knock. A small wooden box worn with age. Someone lifted it carefully. Opened it. Inside were bones. Tiny. Fragile. Wrapped in cloth so old it crumbled on touch. No one spoke. They placed the box beside Igioma's grave under the Iroko tree. They didn't open it again. Just sang. Softly. A lullaby passed down through generations. A song meant to calm spirits. A song meant for mothers. That night the Iroko tree bloomed. For the first time in anyone's memory, it sprouted white flowers. Dozens. Each one shaped like a tiny open palm. The scent filled the compound, sweet, gentle, peaceful. And that night the dreams returned. But they were different. Ibuka saw Igioma again. But this time she wasn't crying. She stood holding the tiny hand of a child. They both smiled. They both glowed. "You remembered me," she said. "Now I can sleep." When he woke, he wasn't afraid. But peace never comes without resistance. The next day the chief fell ill. Not from fever or cough. Something deeper. Something silent. He stopped speaking. Stopped eating. Just stared at the Iroko tree through his window. The villagers began to whisper. Some said the tree had taken something from him. Some said it had returned something he thought was buried. But Mama Attica knew the truth. The tree didn't curse him, she said. The truth did. Chief Obinna sat in his hut, unmoving, unmoved. His eyes stayed open, his chest still rose and fell, but no words came. Not a sound. Not a blink. Just stillness. Like something inside him had been taken and locked away. The people whispered. He has entered a spiritual sleep. He's being punished. The Iroko has claimed him. But the truth wasn't that simple. Something deeper had settled into him. A silence born not from fear but from shame. Ibuka was afraid to go near him at first. But Mama Attica called him. Sit with him, she said. Let him hear a voice that still believes in goodness. So Ibuka sat by the door each morning. He told the chief stories, small ones. About the market, about the goats, about how Ifyananya chased a lizard with a broom. The chief never laughed, never blinked. But one morning his hand twitched. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ibuka ran to tell Mama Adiku. She nodded slowly. The truth is loosening the chains. But what truth, Grandma? Didn't we already uncover everything? Mama Adiku's lips tightened. Not everything. That night she called the family together. They gathered under the Iroko, its white flowers still shining, though some had begun to fall. There is one more thing I must tell you, she said. Before I join the ancestors. No one interrupted. Not even the birds. The box we found beneath the second tree. That child, it was not just Igioma's. Eyes turned toward her. The child belonged to two people. Igioma and Chief Uche. A few people nodded. They already knew. But Mama Adiku's next words broke the silence like thunder. But the child was not stillborn. Everything stopped. She took a shaky breath. He lived. For a moment. He cried. What? Just once. And Chief Uche? He pressed his hand over the baby's mouth until the crying stopped. Gasps filled the air. Ibuka felt his stomach twist. He looked at the Iroko tree at the carving of Igioma's name. It felt heavier now. The baby was alive? Someone whispered. Yes, she said, her voice barely a breath. And I stood there. I watched. I did nothing. Tears rolled down her face, but she didn't wipe them. I was afraid. I was young. And I let it happen. That has lived inside me every day since. The Iroko tree shuddered. Not from wind. Not from touch. It moved on its own. Branches bent. Leaves rustled like a crowd of whispering mouths. And then, blood. Not from the trunk. From the branches. Each white flower began to drip red, turning the ground beneath it into a red and white blanket. The villagers screamed. Some fled. Others dropped to their knees. But Mama Adiku stood firm. This is her voice, she said. This is the cry that was silenced. This is the truth that must be answered. Ibuka stepped forward. What do we do? She looked at him, eyes clear despite her age. We give them names. He didn't understand at first. They already have names. No, she said. We buried bones. But we never gave them dignity. We never honored them as our own. We treated them like secrets, not people. It is time to speak their names, not just whisper them. That evening, the elders, the women, the children, the entire compound gathered. A new grave was dug beside Igioma's. The baby's remains were placed inside a smaller carved coffin, wrapped in fresh white cloth, rubbed with palm oil and herbs. Mama Adiku stood, holding a calabash of water and ashes. I name you Chika, she said, because God is greater than shame. You are no longer a secret. You are a son of this land. And for the first time the Iroko tree stopped bleeding completely. Not a drop. Just stillness. A deep, peaceful stillness. But the chief was still silent. Ibuka returned to his hut, sat beside him once more. We buried the child, Papa, he whispered. We gave him a name. The chief blinked. Then he blinked again. Slowly his eyes turned to Ibuka. His lips parted. Igioma, he whispered. Then his head bowed. Not in death but in surrender. He wept. Quietly. Gently. Years of silence broken by a name. Outside the Iroko dropped one last flower. And for the first time it didn't fall red. It fell white. They buried Mama Adiku 3 days later. She died in her sleep, facing the Iroko tree. A soft smile on her face, her hands folded across her chest like someone who had finally laid down a heavy load. There was no fear in the way she left, only peace. The village gave her the burial of a queen. Drums echoed into the hills. The women sang songs she taught them. Elders poured libations. Even the chief, still frail and silent, stood beside her grave, leaning on Ibuka's shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His tears said what words could not. The land felt different afterward. The goats returned to grazing calmly. The well water ran clear again. Birds came back to the Iroko tree, perching on its branches like it had never wept blood. And for the first time in many moons the village children played near the tree. They didn't fear it. They sat under its shade, sometimes laying their heads against its trunk like it was a mother. Ibuka began carving names into the base of the Iroko, names of people who were once forgotten. Igioma, Chika, Mama Adiku. He made sure the letters were deep and strong so that long after he was gone, someone else would still read them. One morning he found an old scroll tucked beneath Mama Adiku's sleeping mat. It was brittle with age but still readable. It told the story of Ijeoma. Not the version passed in whispers but the full truth, what she said, what she did, how she begged to live. At the bottom, in Mama Adiku's handwriting, were 7 words. Tell this story to anyone who will listen. So he did. He told it to the children under the moon. He told it to strangers at the market. He told it during festivals, by firelight, when the wind carried the drums far into the bush. And each time he told it, he left nothing out. He told them about a powerful chief who chose pride over mercy. About a girl who had no family but deserved one. About a tree that refused to stay silent. And about how truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds its way to the surface. People came from other villages to see the Iroko. Some brought offerings. Some just stood there and wept. Many returned home and began asking questions. About their own land, their own trees, their own forgotten stories. One day as the sun was setting, a young girl stood beneath the Iroko. She looked no older than 8. Her eyes were wide with wonder. "Is it true the tree used to bleed?" she asked. Ibuka smiled. "Yes. Why doesn't it bleed anymore?" He looked up at the tree. The white flowers had returned again. This time brighter than ever. Because someone finally listened. She reached out and touched the trunk gently. "Will it bleed again?" "No," he said. "Not if we remember." She nodded, then ran off to join the other children. That night, Ibuka sat by the tree alone. The wind was soft. The stars blinked slowly. He leaned back and closed his eyes. For the first time since he was a boy, he didn't dream of blood. He dreamed of a woman in white. She stood under the Iroko holding a small boy. She smiled at Ibuka. "Thank you," she said. And then she turned, walked into the tree and disappeared. The next morning when the villagers came to greet the Iroko, they found something new. Another name had been carved into its trunk. Ibuka. No one knew who carved it. The bark was uncut the night before. But the letters were fresh, deep and clear. The exact same style he had used for Ijeoma and Chika. They say the tree remembered him. And they say to this day if you sit quietly under the Iroko just before dawn, when the dew is still wet and the air is thick with silence, you'll hear a girl's laughter and a child humming a lullaby. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the tree say what it was never allowed to say before. Thank you for remembering me. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe and turn on your notification for more. See you soon.